Okay, we might make a start and let people pop in and out as they get on board. Thank you, Mike, for agreeing to do this presentation for us today. Um, and we thoroughly appreciate your time and what you've put into it for us. This program's being recorded today, so it will be available for you to watch in a week or so on the website under the members only area. So let's make a start. Mike, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Look, I'd like to take questions. Let's see how we go as to taking questions as we go, or wait to the end. We'll see how the process goes. Um, so, look, cybersecurity, big topic. It sits on all of business leaders. It sits on all of our shoulders now, right? So, my background, I'm a KPM, ex-KPMG partner. I sit on boards myself, so I understand it from both a practitioner viewpoint, as in helping organizations, and also, receiving information. So what I wanted to start with is just to take some come back to sort of first principles. Um, and what I mean by that is I'm going to talk about why or who we're protecting against, and then I want to talk about, some definitions of terms we hear bandied around, just so that we're all on the same page, right? So who are we protecting against? I think it's really important to understand that these are big, serious organizations. They're businesses, right? They are organized crime businesses. They work in call center type operations. This is not two guys in the basement in a hoodie. This is very different to that. And what they're doing is the organized crime groups are working on a volume basis. In other words, if they just send out thousands and thousands, someone's going to click on something and then they're off, right? So the logic of, oh, we're too small to be a target isn't necessarily true. And, they have no great science to choosing organizations over any other organization. It's what they can find. Um, Organized crime, they're doing it for money, right? And that's about fraudulent payments, or it's selling your data, or it's holding you to ransom. It's about money, right? Um, in the middle, you've got state actors. Now, this may sound a bit like Born Identity. It isn't. It's very real, right? The war that's raging most in Eastern Europe now is around cyber. So, what the Russians did just over Christmas is they shut down most of Poland's wind farms by a cyber attack. Very simple how they did it, and as most of these attacks are, quite frankly. Um, and that's happening all the time, right? And then on the right-hand side, we're seeing less of this now, but people who do hacking for more political reasons and mega protests. So you think of, environmental groups attacking an oil company and taking down their website, that kind of thing. So again, for you guys, you're probably not going to be involved in state actor or hacktivist stuff, but you are likely in both your personal lives and business lives, to come in contact with, the organized crime side of this. Um, I'm going to come back to this, but we look at cyber risk in kind of five areas. Why? Is because they're not all the same things, right? And we sometimes find terms being used in the wrong places, in our opinion, in terms of conversation. So we're going to spend a little bit of time in a minute talking about identity and access risk, which is on the left. That's login credentials. And what's happening now, and I'm going to throw a stat up later, is that these are the keys to your kingdom. And now we're seeing attackers log in, not break in anymore, right? Because um, then what you've got working to the right, I'm going to come back to, but I want to spend some time on that identity and access risk because it's both a personal life and a business life world, how we look after our credentials. So let's move into that piece. And what I want to do, oh, sorry, a bit of a click. What I want to do is just work through some definitions. You may know this stuff, but I think it's always important to kind of talk a little bit about what we are talking about, right? So the most common, and I'm going to show you an example in a minute, is phishing. And what that is an attacker impersonates a trusted source to trick you into clicking on something and often to reveal information, but that click could also release some nasties into your environment or onto your computer, right? Um, so very common, thousands and thousands of these every day. One of the favorites is the post office to pose to be the post office because we all think we might have a parcel to collect, so we click on it to find out if we do, so very, very normal kind of reactions. And they're getting very good at them. They look really good, some of these. So um, that's the most common, I think, thing that we're going to see. The next one is fits into the cyber category, but it's a little bit different. It's fraud, it's spoofing. And what that is typically it looks like an email sent maybe from someone within the organization to someone else to say, oh, pay this invoice. And what typically they do is they send themselves an invoice that then gets mail forwarded. So it looks like a totally natural thing that's going on here. Someone sent someone an invoice and then they're asking for it to be paid. And that is, the other way of doing it, not just getting paid, is maybe changing the payment details to a different bank account. So that one you stop it in a similar way to you stop phishing. I'm going to show you a real example of phishing in a second. Then this is credential stuffing, which is a very odd term, but what it means is usernames and passwords that have been leaked are available on the dark web, and they're just tried. They just try them, right? Um, and if you think you don't have your personal details on the dark web, think again. You do, right? Everyone does, right? Because all of those thousands of breaches back from Optus and Medibank and you name it, it keeps going. Qantas and it keeps going. That's your email data that gets up there. So that's why it's really important to have a unique password. Um, and because if you keep using it, that's when you'll fall to credential stuffing because they've got them. They've got the one you might use on your Qantas Frequent Flyer and they try it somewhere else. That's basically what's going on there. Very easy to do. Um, this one's quite exciting in a way, and I don't think it is appropriate to you guys necessarily, but it's very real. What they're doing, these guys, is they're watching, and I've just realized, I'm sorry, I've missed an H out of phishing. It's supposed to be have another H in the middle of it. I apologize. Um, what they do, these guys, is they watch LinkedIn for someone joining an organization. And then they phone the service desk and say, hey, I'm such and such. I've just joined and I've got all my passwords wrong. I'm really sorry. Can you help me? And what are those guys intend there to do? Help people, right? So they help and they get it all reset. And what they've just done is handed over password access to someone. Yeah. And so what you're finding in the government, in the US government, is they are now no longer allowed to post their new jobs online on LinkedIn. And what you're also finding here, what they do once they're in, is they try and go somewhere else, right? They try and work their way, this way and that way. Um, Incredibly brazen, right? And don't be surprised by how brazen these guys really are. And then the sort of the last one we hear bandied around is ransomware. Um, the phishing or vishing or credential stuffing can lead to ransomware. And ransomware is where um, they deploy some software onto your computer that either locks up the computer or it locks up your data. And then they demand payment to restore it, to give it back to you. And this is a shocker, right? It's an awful thing to happen. And there are now laws being passed, and I believe they're passed in Australia now that says it's illegal to pay a ransom. You can't do that. And the reality is you pay the ransom, you don't see your data back anyway, right? So they've done too much damage. Even if they gave you the key to unlock it, they've done too much damage to it. So there's a way around that, but yeah. So those are some of the definitions of some of the things that we're talking about today and we see in our personal life and business life, right? Just keep an eye on the time so I don't rabbit on too long. This is a real phishing example from Monday. Here we go. So nice and fresh. And here it is, right? So it's supposedly from Qantas Pay, and it says, unless you do something here, you're going to have to lose your access. And there's a lovely piece of it. If you look just below the red box, it says, this is a one-time verification to help protect your account. This is someone stealing your data, but they're being very helpful about it. How would you know that that is bogus, right? Well, two ways. And the two pictures on the right are the example. The first one is if you're in doubt, just hover over the email address that sent it to you, right? And this one is no reply at wufoo.com. And you think, well, that's highly unlikely to be. But you can then do a quick lookup on wufoo.com. Ask ChatGPT, does wufoo.com have anything to do with Qantas Pay, right? So, and the answer is probably no. And the other one on this one, not always the case, but this time they've decided to email a whole bunch of people on one email. So getting a bit lazy. You can see I'm one of them, aren't I lucky? And again, is Qantas Pay likely, or any financial institution, like to email a whole bunch of people with a single link that is supposed to be your link? No, they're not, right? So I think what these guys rely on is that we're all busy, we're all moving fast, we're all probably looking at this stuff on a phone, which is not the best medium to see it, and as in it's smaller, just if in doubt, pause and take a minute, and then take another minute because once you've clicked, that genie is out of the bottle. And that's not what we want. So take a minute to have a look. Now, the good news is I tried to email this to one of my proper email accounts because this came to my Hotmail account and it was blocked straight away, right? So I couldn't even email it forward to take screenshots of it. So that's good, right? And so these things are well captured, but please don't rely on that 100% because it's the one there. There's this adage in cybersecurity is we have to be right all the time and be protecting all the time. They only have to be right once, right? And they're in and they've got you. Yeah. So that's an example of what those things can look like. I'm sure you've seen many of those yourself. Um, so how do we stop this? How do we make this really hard, right? And how does this fit into other things that I'm going to tell you? But multi-factor authentication, MFA, sounds like a mouthful, but that's the answer, right? And you're getting it on lots of things now, right? That way, and it's very simple. What it's doing is using two things, two what they're calling factors, to get you to log in. One of those is something you have, and one of those is something you know, right? So something you know is your password, and something you have is your phone, right? So the text message, done, right? Now I've got two levels. And I don't know how you've got your banking set up, but sometimes they even do two-factor for transactions over a certain amount, as well as logging in, so that there's layers. But, and here's the big but, is, I said to you earlier that, I'm going to share a stat. About 67%, two-thirds of all the investigated cyber incidents from Sophos as a global service provider of protecting people, they were identity related. In other words, that nearly two-thirds of or more than two-thirds of their attacks were people who logged on, right? And part of that is because they have no MFA, and part of it is because the MFA is weak. So not all MFA is created equal, and we now move into a thing called phishing resistant MFA. So let me give you an example, right? If someone's got your credential in your machine, in your account, and the MFA is an email that they've already got, right? They can see your email. It's not very much MFA, is it really? It's and you see those, don't you? Oh, I've sent you an email with the code in it. Well, not great, I don't think. So phishing resistant MFA is something where, and I'm not going to get into the cryptography of it, but it's where something doesn't leave the device. Right? The something you know and something you have are separated. Right? And a great example you may use this is Microsoft Authenticator, and if it's on your phone, that's secured by facial recognition. So now you've got two or three layers there of phishing resistant MFA. So if you do nothing else, get MFA on everything you can. If you can find out about phishing resistant MFA and go to that level, do it. And the good news is for most businesses that own M365, there's nothing for you to buy, right? It's in there. You just turn it on, right? So that's good. So let's keep moving on. So they're after your credentials. They are looking for weakness. If you make it harder, they move to the next. It's as simple as that, right? You don't have to be a bank. You're not. You don't have to be locked down 100%. You just have to be, better than basic, and moving forward, to make it hard for these people. So let's just talk about this in real terms of a breach, right? So this is Australia's biggest breach. 9.7 million people were impacted of us. That's not other people, that's us. Right? This happened in 2022 and still around because the Australian government is taking Medibank to court over it. They've just won a case, which is a $2.5 million fine. Not against Medibank. That case still hasn't finished. Um, so they're really trying to get directors, particularly, to be on the hook for the impact of cybercrime, and by putting in penalties. So it's carrot and stick. So let's just talk through what happened here, right? So a contractor, came to work at Medibank on the help desk. Right? Now, there's a bunch of things in here that you go at places where this could have been stopped, but the first one was he was able somehow to save his Medibank username and password to his personal browser on Google, right? This is Google Chrome. It says, "Can you want to save this password?" Yes, I do, right? And so that wasn't locked down. And then when he went home, um, the those credentials were stolen, right? They were already in his browser, so whenever he opened the browser, they were there, and somehow they were stolen. Unclear how, because not a great lot of forensics on his PC. And then, unfortunately, it was one account that enabled access to so much, so many things. And so what happened then was that the people who got it, whether they did this themselves or they sold it to someone else is unclear, but they used those credentials to get in to Medibank, wander around Medibank, and steal all of this data. They stole 520 gigabytes of data. So you imagine how much that is, right? And how that, I mean, it is quite staggering. Um, and as in most of these cases, they had some cyber tools that saw things and popped up alerts. But if you don't do anything to the alert, it's like anything, right? It's not going to go get solved by ignoring it. And so it wasn't. And so between sort of, early August and early October, they were able to take a small amount of data out every day before it was discovered. They even used the same passwords. This guy could also, his access could get into Confluence, which is a database of all the systems information. And in there was all of the information they needed to find out about the data, where it was, where it was stored. It's, you know, it is quite amazing because all of that could have been fixed by strong MFA at multiple points and multiple passwords. For example, what I mean by that is, one password for this and one password for that. It's not rocket science, but that's a real story. It hasn't played out yet. It will, Medibank will have spent a fortune in resurrecting their sort of systems and reputation, but it's going to come back again because they're going to get fined at some point, one would think. Here's another one. This is brand new. Look at the date. Oh, sorry. Look at the date, 22nd of April 2026. This is New Zealand. Almost anyone that's been to a doctor in New Zealand in the last period has had their data stolen. Yeah. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Because this is what happens when you're faced with a breach, right? You're looking to protect a set of assets, right? In your business world, not a huge number of systems. And they're not cheap stations. I get it, right? You're not going, oh, it's not millions of dollars. I get all of that. But as soon as you've got some data leaked, you're then in a whole world of work, of having to report it to different agencies, having to talk to the people whose data's been affected. It's a big, big effort. Even if the cleanup, technically, the computer cleanup can be quite quick and easy. The actual just like the Medibank one, these things just roll on, right? A lot of work, and all of a sudden, all of your days are focused on the breach and talking to customers and suppliers and the government and the health department, and you get it, right? And this is just scary, isn't it? Like if you read the data that's been stolen, your name, your date of birth, your national health index, the contact details, what procedure you had, who funded it. I mean, just awful amount of information to be available. And here it is. The data was exfiltrated is another word for stolen, and made available on the dark web. I don't know whether the next bit they're trying to explain there is that it's good that the dark web is a hidden part of the internet because the people who are going to do bad things with this data know that anyway. It's only you and me that can't get to the dark web, right? So, awful. And so these things are happening, and the point of this isn't to, revel in their misery. It's more to say there's a huge amount of work that happens when even a tiny breach occurs. So let's just get back to this and talk from a business perspective, right? Um, your any form of cybersecurity must be commensurate or relative to the scale of what you're trying to protect, right? And put that in a very simple way, you're not going to put a $10,000 padlock on a $2 door, right? It's that simple. So what we're looking at here are the five pillars that we talk about, and we've talked a little bit about a fair bit about the identity and access risks down the left-hand side, and that's protecting your keys, right? If you think of this as a building or your home, you're not going to leave your keys sitting on the driveway, right? So that's what that's about. Then when so how could attackers get in if they weren't getting in through the keys? Well, they get in because maybe your firewall, your perimeter isn't very strong. You can check that. Or you might have some old systems that have got some vulnerabilities, and there are lots of them. Lots and lots of software has lots of vulnerabilities. Or it might come through a third party that you're connected with third parties, and that might be the place where the attackers can get in there and work their way into your systems. Right? Maybe not, in your cases, but that's kind of how that happens. And that's a very difficult one because in this world, we are connected to our suppliers and our customers much more than we ever were in most businesses, aren't we? I mean, it just is. So we don't really know what every one of those people is doing and what their partners and suppliers are doing. So one of the reasons we all should play a part in cybersecurity is we keep each other secure as well as ourselves. So identity and access is the top one. You can then ask questions of, whoever's looking after your IT, just what are we doing in these spaces? Containment risk, I'm not that, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but if I can give you an example of what that means is if you're a supermarket, you wouldn't put your tills and your FPOS machines on the same network as where the fridges are reporting that they're cold enough, right? Because so just by putting split, it's logical, right? You just split things up into spaces so that if someone gets in one place, they can't go wandering around everywhere. Impact. What stops the business is ransomware, or any form of data loss, privacy breaches, as I just showed you there. Um, and also then a backup failure. How you stop ransomware is if you were hit by ransomware, is you would simply say, well, it's okay because we take a backup every night and we've got it off, it's over there. So I could restore my whole system from backup. So I'm not worried. It's going to take me a little bit of effort, but I'm not completely locked out. But if your backups aren't good and your backups aren't tested and they're not offsite, then the first thing they will do is delete them. The ransomware attack, they go in, they find them, they delete them if they're available, because otherwise, they understand how that works. Right? So we're working with a Melbourne-based manufacturing company after they had been breached, and that's exactly what the ransomware guys did. They wandered in, they wandered round, they found that they backed up to the cloud. Sounds great. And they went, delete those, thank you very much. And they were gone. And then the last piece to think about from you thinking about this is, why do incidents escalate and become difficult? Well, incident response gaps, poor detection, logging, unrehearsed decision making. Let me just talk about that for a minute. What are we saying here? What we're saying is, um, you need to be thinking about if someone got into this system and stole some data or locked up some data or got a fraudulent payment made, what would you do? And you shouldn't be making that up when it happens. You do it as a plan now, right? And then you rehearse it a little. We're talking to a company only yesterday, right? They're doing their big cybersecurity insurance renewal, and the insurance company said, "Well, we really want a lot more information from you." And one of the questions for them was, well, what happens if? And they went, oh, no, no, we've got this partner down the road. They're going to help us. Great. Have you ever tried? No. Is it contracted? No. So how do you know? And that's really what this is trying to say is let's remove some of the guesswork. If you're going to rely on your partner, at least chat to them about that and at least work out, are they up for that? Is that what they're going to do? And have a think about who would phone who? Who would phone the department if you had a data breach, if you had to? Who would do what? So that's kind of the areas that I think are really interesting to look at, right? Make sure you're doing whatever you can in the identity and access area. Um, have a look at this area, but I don't think it's the big one for you guys. These two are, right? Making sure that your backups are working, and here have a think about how you'd respond. Now, putting that into context is there are some frameworks you can use for this, right? And the one I'm going to talk about is Essential 8. It's developed by the government, Australian government, and it's very, very well documented. And that's what's great about it, right? You don't need to pay money to find out about Essential 8. It's all documented, it's all online. And don't get fooled into thinking it's just 8 things, it's 8 areas. But within that, there are level 1, there's 50 things to do, and they go up by about 50 for each level. So level 2, 100, level 3, 150. Um, you should be thinking about level 1. And why are they important? Why is because what they do is they answer these big questions that I know a lot of people are worried about. Are we doing the right things? Are we doing enough? How do you measure that, right? And what about our risk appetite? Can we bring this in within our risk appetite? And what reporting makes sense, right? Well, what frameworks do is they describe those right things in detail. They provide you sort of levels of things so you can see what is enough. They provide measurement, and they provide you with the basis for reporting. So really, you don't have to make this up for yourself. It's already been done for you. You can use it as a bit of a guide. Um, and here is, so there are many, many cyber frameworks out there. The Essential 8 I've been talking about, there's a medium-sized one from um, what we call the CIS, and then this is the daddy of them all, the NIST standard, NIST one, and that's massive, and very, very clever. But I mean, for most Australian organisations, get this under control will take you a long way forward. Which is why the government has done it, right? They're not doing it just out of academic interest. They're doing it because they know if they could get everyone on this bandwagon, the whole country becomes much more secure, and which is good for everyone. So what you do with the Essential 8 is you can have a read of it. You can read about it. and you can ask whoever's looking after your IT to have a look at it and have a think about it, and give you give a quick assessment of where do you think you are, right? Now, multi-factor authentication is number 7, so we've talked about that in a lot of detail. Um, there is, and number 5 is also about the stuff we talked about with the Medibank breach, which is restricting admin privileges. The big keys to the castle, the access to everything should be very tightly looked after. And then regular backups, we talked about that. Number 8, we talked about that being the way to thwart ransomware. So as you can see, um, the things we've talked about today are largely in here. Um, and, and it's a very good thing to start having a good look at. Yeah. So look, I'm going to take some questions, but let me just sort of summarize where we've been today, right? Cybersecurity isn't a technical issue. It isn't something that just happens. It's cybercrime, right? And I'm quite vocal about this. If we start talking about it as cybercrime, I think we approach it from a different way, right? Having said that, you've got to think about it as a risk, in your business. So the things that we talk about are, really understand what you're trying to protect. That starts number 1. Then you can build from there, right? So, and build from there with your basics in place. So if you do nothing else out of this session, but go and put MFA everywhere you can, what we say is, look, you do 3 things, right? Number 1 is you get your M365 as tight as it can be, which includes MFA and includes other identity controls. You you then do the rest with Essential 8, like your backups and other things. And then third, you get a 24/7 managed service. So that's really what this is saying. So put MFA everywhere, get your M365 under control because you own it and it doesn't cost a lot. You use a framework like Essential 8 to guide your thinking, so you can make a quick assessment on that. Are we doing this? Are we not? Should we? That kind of discussion. You start with level 1 maturity and you identify some quick wins and it's a journey. Then you get a 24/7 cyber managed service. We recommend this one because it works for small organizations, right? And even tiny ones, right? It works really well. Why? Because what you'll find is the majority of attacks happen after hours. And the favorite is Friday night, Saturday morning, because they've got the whole weekend to go and do what they need to do. Um, so, you want someone watching when you're not watching. Yeah. And the last thing is, it's like a lot of other business risks. You're not going to spend 10 minutes and fix it. It's an ongoing program of improvement. You're going to keep thinking about it and moving forward with it. Um, and that's where things like Essential 8 help you because you can see, well, what would be the next thing I would do here, and which bits are going to give me the best return on my investment for security, right? I get it. It's not a bottomless pit. There isn't money to spend on everything. So we need to pick our battles and pick our money. And that's to finish off why we're so keen on you leveraging your M365 security because you've paid for M365 and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. Yeah. Right. I'm going to pause. I've been yattering on for 35 minutes and I'm going to take a breath and I'm happy to take any questions or observations or anything wherever you'd like to take it.
So either put your hand up for me or put the question in the chat and then we can answer them as we go along.
Yeah. I'll ask you. Yeah. Kerry's got her hand up. No?
Just a quick one. If with a lot of these programs for managing cybersecurity, do you think it's probably more for Narelle? Do you think the department would actually pay for us to have these systems in place?
Kerry, Rob and I were just chatting about that, about we will go now following Mike's presentation and see what the department's point of view is and where do we go from here. So it's a bit of a watch this space because it's not a question that we've asked the department before. But
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
we will come back to you with an answer.
No problem. I mean, it's all well and good. I've got fairly good security on my computer, and I use multi-factor identity and that myself. But yeah, for some people don't have that security in place on their home PCs, especially.
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, we just had that
Yeah,
conversation minutes ago about how important it will be to ask the department, because if we're going back to who do we report it to, we've got to have a plan.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question in the chat, Mike,
Yeah.
that is, how safe is the cloud?
That's a big question. It's a very big question. Yeah. Look, I'm going to say it's the cloud's a lot of things, right? Yeah. So I'm going to use, just I have to come to a kind of a general statement. But look, it's if you're talking about SaaS applications, software as a service applications, which we all use all the time, right? M365 is one, but there's, we use 100 of them every day, don't we? Every one of them is going to have a slightly different security posture to another, right? Generally, the cloud is fine. It's got no more inherent good or bad than on-premise. You just need to look after it. You need to make sure you've got the right passwords and you've got your multi-factor authentication, and then there'll be other questions depending on what that cloud application is doing, right? So yeah, we all do use them, we all trust them, don't we? I mean, so from internet banking, that's on the cloud, right? Through to through our photos and through to M365, all very different, but yeah. So I think that's a great answer, but that's my answer.
Glenn, you've got your hand up.
It's just like in the office, with all our programs, we have the multi-factor authorization. We do everything very well and very aware. We have everything backed off site through another company. We seem to do everything right, but I kind of worry in some regards to a lot of the information, everything is emailed out, especially to trust members. Um, and it's probably that side of things in regards to people that have Hotmail addresses and Gmail addresses. They're getting quite a lot of information, including um, uh, banking details, as well as a whole host of other things in regards to even our pay details and all that type of stuff. Um, how do we ensure um, that stuff that goes off-site, we're doing everything right? Um, that that is catered for as well.
I think, Glenn, I think that's a great question, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, you've identified one of the big gaps that a lot of organizations have, right? Now, there's a couple of answers to that. Number one answer is stop emailing it and send links, right? If you're using M365, you can send a link to it sitting on a OneDrive or a SharePoint or yeah, and you just get that set up so it's nice and easy to do. That's probably my biggest recommendation. You can do other things around setting up within M365 what they call data loss prevention things to stop accidental release. But you're not talking about that. I mean, they're good to do, by the way. They, stopping accidental release. So I type in, I hope to type in Glenn Berry, but I type in Glenn Smith, and all of a sudden I've sent something, to the wrong person. There's some stuff there that we can do. But if you think about that, if you then had that, the only way they can get in is through their username, password, and maybe even MFA on the OneDrive. Yes, you've put an extra step in. I get that, but that's sometimes what security is about. Unfortunately, putting the extra step in. Yeah. So most, a lot of organizations, you talk about trust members, use board software to do exactly that, and it's just a clever version of a OneDrive. Really, it's just a data repository, and and that's what that's for exactly that purpose you've mentioned. But I think you can do a lot of that, as I say, with a OneDrive or a SharePoint account area.
That's good. Thank you.
Just to comment a little bit on the department. Just be careful with, and I know this kind of is a double-edged sword, right? But for example, they push out a number. I'm on a board in the health space, and they put out the Department of Health push out a set of tools that people can use. And one of those tools, and it is just completely unnecessary for smaller and medium-sized organizations, right? Not for them and not for the hospitals. Absolutely great, right? And I see some people trying to use it because they almost think, oh, the department have given it to us, we must use it. Right? And it's actually not fixing a risk that they have, right? It's, if you know what I mean. So that's the only thing I would say. Sometimes there is a scale issue. We know when, as I say, why the department bought it for what they use it for. Very good idea. They bought it on a basis, oh, we can give it to everybody in our orbit. And so they make it available. But that doesn't mean to say that's what's going to help you and you need to grab it and run with it, if you know what I mean.
So, Mike, we might be back to you with some checklist requests and a whole lot of further discussion in this space to
Yeah,
help
absolutely.
members.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But as I say, I think the great news is, if you can get your M365 working, and that example I just gave you, Glenn, and it's a great question, and that's all within what you've already paid for. It's just a bit of setup. You can go a long way to getting, and M365 includes Defender, we don't sell Microsoft products, right? So I'm coming from a position of just saying that, what's in that kit though is really good.
So do we have any more questions from anywhere? The recording will be available, so if there's something that you want to go back and listen to, it will be there. But we might wind it up today if there are no more questions. So, Mike, thank you so very much for the informative information that we've received. I'm sure everybody's going to go away with a whole lot to think about and discuss with their trusts. I know that from the association point of view, we've got lots more questions that we're going to go back and have a chat about and how we can move forward working with you to make it easier.
Lovely.
So thank you everybody for your time this morning. Our next session on the 29th of May, you're going to get the PR bit this end, will be on cemetery design and construction. So if you've got any particular questions you would like covered in that presentation, please flick them to me in the next week or so that we can work towards building that into the presentation. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Hope you enjoy the good weather, and we'll see you in a month's time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Mike.
You.